The first thing I noticed was that I was no longer standing in my lab. The second thing I noticed was the cold metal barrel of a gun pressed gently, but very deliberately, against the center of my forehead. The third thing I noticed was that I was standing on someone's bed. Not beside it. Not near it. On it. Sheets tangled around my boots, pillows scattered like I had just lost a wrestling match with them. For a brief, hopeful second, I considered the possibility that this was still a teleportation hallucination. Maybe my brain had scrambled. Maybe I was drooling back in the lab while my nervous system rebooted. Then the gun clicked. Very real. Very loaded sounding. "Explain," said a calm female voice behind it. "Why I should not eliminate you." I swallowed. Now I consider myself a reasonably intelligent human. I graduated top of my class in quantum transport engineering. I once rebuilt a fusion relay using only cafeteria utensils and stubbornness. But in that moment, staring down a weapon that probably had more settings than stun and erase from history, my brain produced exactly one sentence. "I have absolutely no idea how I got here." Her eyes narrowed. Wrong answer, apparently. Let me rewind 30 minutes. I was never supposed to test the teleporter alone. There were at least 12 warning labels on the prototype platform. Do not activate without authorization. Do not test organic transport solo. If you can read this, step away from the button. In my defense, those labels had been there for 6 months, and nothing exciting had happened in 6 months. Also, the night shift gets boring. Also, humans are historically very bad at not pressing mysterious buttons. The device itself was beautiful. 2 circular rings humming softly, blue energy threading between them like captured lightning. Years of work, ridicule from senior engineers, budget cuts, and exactly one incident involving a hamster that now technically existed 3 seconds in the future had led to this moment. All I wanted was a tiny test jump. 5 feet forward. Heroic. Safe. Career-saving. I stepped onto the platform, adjusted the coordinates, and said to no one, "What's the worst that could happen?" The universe, as it turns out, loves that sentence. There was a flash bright enough to turn my skeleton into modern art. A sensation like being squeezed through a drinking straw. Then, bed. Gun. Potential death. Back to the present. The woman holding the weapon did not look impressed with my life choices. Up close, she was terrifying. Not in a loud way. Not in a monstrous way. She was terrifying the way a perfectly balanced blade is terrifying, still, precise, and clearly designed for violence. Her skin carried a faint silver undertone that caught the dim room light. Dark hair was pulled back tightly, practical and severe. A thin scar crossed one eyebrow, the kind that suggested whoever gave it to her had not enjoyed the experience afterward. Most alarming of all, her posture wasn't surprised. It was annoyed. Like I had tracked mud across a freshly cleaned floor instead of materializing out of thin air. "Your species," she said slowly, "generally prefers doors." "Oh, I love doors," I said quickly. "Huge fan. Walk through them all the time when I'm not accidentally quantum launching myself into strangers' bedrooms." Her gaze sharpened. "You are not dressed as an assassin." I looked down at my grease-stained engineering jumpsuit. "Budget assassin?" The gun pressed slightly harder into my forehead. Note to self, humor was not improving the situation. Only then did I notice the rest of the room. Lights were low. One entire wall was transparent, revealing a sprawling neon city stretching into the night, towering structures layered vertically, streams of airborne traffic weaving between them like glowing rivers. And directly across from the building, a shattered window. Smoke drifting outward. She wasn't relaxing in bed. She had been prone, watching. Waiting. "Oh," I whispered. "You were staking someone out." Her eyes flicked briefly toward the distant building. 3 days, she said. "No movement. No mistakes." Then she looked back at me. "And then you appeared." I raised a finger. "In my defense, I also consider this a mistake." A sudden explosion ripped through the distant structure. Glass burst outward. A dark figure shot from the building on some kind of propulsion rig. The woman moved before the sound even finished echoing. The gun vanished into a magnetic holster at her thigh as she crossed the room in 2 impossibly fast strides. A sleek rifle snapped off a wall mount. "You disrupted my surveillance," she said flatly. "I disrupt a lot of things," I admitted. She glanced at my wrist device, still sparking weakly. "Teleportation technology is restricted across 12 sectors." "Oh good," I said. "So this is illegal everywhere." "That feels consistent." She grabbed my arm. Her grip was iron. "Congratulations, human," she said. "You will assist me. I don't even know what you—" The floor lurched. No, not the floor. The entire room detached. With a thunderous mechanical hum, the apartment peeled away from the building. Panels folded inward, engines ignited, and suddenly we were no longer inside a structure. We were inside a ship. A very fast ship. The city dropped beneath us as we accelerated into traffic streams. Wind roared past the hull. My stomach attempted to file for relocation. "You live in a detachable sniper nest?" I shouted over the noise. "Efficient," she replied. The fleeing target zigzagged between transports ahead of us. She shoved me toward a console. "Track him." "I don't know your system." "You are an engineer." "That doesn't make me magically bilingual in alien spaceship." Her stare suggested she believed it should. Blips danced across the display. Symbols I didn't recognize flickered rapidly. I poked one. An alarm screamed. She reached past me, corrected it without looking, and said, "Touch nothing unless instructed." "Excellent rule," I said. "Wish I'd followed it an hour ago." A cluster of other ships appeared on the scanner. She muttered something under her breath. "What?" I asked. "Other hunters." "Hunters? They will assume you are my partner." I blinked. "Partner? We met 30 seconds ago." Ahead, another vessel veered sharply away from our path. Its pilot actually saluted. Saluted me. My voice climbed an octave. "Why did they salute me?" "Reputation," she said. "But I don't have a reputation." "You are with me," she replied. We surged forward. The target deployed some kind of interference field. The scanner fuzzed into static. She swore quietly. For the first time, uncertainty crossed her face. I leaned closer to the console, instincts taking over despite my terror. "Wait, that distortion, it's overlapping frequencies. He's masking by mirroring traffic signals." She glanced at me. "Can you counter it?" My hands were already moving. "Probably. Humans are very good at fixing things we broke in the first place." Seconds later, a clean signal cut through the noise. Target reacquired. She looked at the display, then at me. Not annoyed this time. Evaluating. "Acceptable," she said. High praise, apparently. The ship angled sharply into pursuit. I tightened my grip on the console and tried not to hyperventilate. If I survived the next 5 minutes, it would be a miracle worthy of human history. I learned 3 very important things in the next 60 seconds. First, alien traffic laws are more like polite suggestions. Second, inertia is a personal enemy. And third, the most feared bounty hunter in the quadrant did not believe in slowing down. The ship dove between 2 massive cargo carriers with less clearance than my shoulders. My stomach attempted a full rebellion. "Are you trying to kill us?" I shouted. "If I were," she said calmly, "you would already be dead." Comforting. The target shot downward into a maze of vertical alleyways carved between kilometer-high towers. Neon advertisements flashed past the cockpit, half of them in languages my brain refused to process. She rolled the ship 90 degrees and threaded us through a gap that absolutely did not look like it was designed for spacecraft. I grabbed the nearest support rail. "Humans," I gasped, "generally pursue criminals from a safe emotional distance." "You teleported into my bed," she replied. You forfeited safety. Fair point. A sharp tone pulsed through the console. More ships were converging. Sleek, predatory silhouettes cutting across the sky. She glanced at the radar and muttered, "Persistent scavengers. Friends of yours?" "No." One of the incoming ships slowed as it passed us. The pilot turned, clearly looking into our cockpit. Then, incredibly, he lifted 2 fingers in a gesture that looked suspiciously respectful. Another vessel drifted wide to give us room. No one challenged us. No one tried to cut ahead. I frowned. Why is everyone being weird? She didn't look away from the controls. They believe you are my partner. That still makes no sense. I do not take partners, she said. And that makes them, what? Terrified of me by association? Yes. I stared at my reflection in the console, rumpled jumpsuit, hair sticking up like I'd been electrocuted, expression halfway between panic and nausea. Outstanding, I whispered. I've been in this galaxy for 10 minutes and I'm already intimidating. The target suddenly fired a burst of crackling blue energy behind him. Our instruments exploded into static. Every display dissolved into shimmering snow. She hit the console with sharp, precise commands. Nothing responded. He's jamming us, I said. I am aware. Her jaw tightened, a microscopic movement, but it might as well have been a siren. The legendary hunter was blind. I leaned closer to the panel, ignoring the way the ship bucked through turbulence. Hold on, I said. He's not blocking you. He's overwhelming your sensors with mirrored signals. You have 3 seconds to simplify that sentence. He's shouting so loudly your equipment can't hear anything else. Fix it. Direct. I appreciated that. I popped open a maintenance strip and exposed a bundle of glowing fiber lines. You're opening my console during a pursuit? Yes, I said. Try not to crash while I perform surgery. Her eyes flicked toward me, sharp, measuring, but she held the course steady. I rerouted 2 lines, cross-fed the signal through what looked like a secondary navigation processor, and forced the system to filter repeating patterns. The static collapsed. 1 clean signal pulsed on the display. There, I said, trying not to sound too proud. He can scream all he wants now. Your system knows which voice is real. For the first time since I'd appeared, she actually looked at me. Not through me. At me. A pause. Then a single nod. Acceptable work, human. I decided that, coming from her, this was roughly equivalent to a standing ovation. She punched the thrusters. We slammed forward. The distance between us and the fleeing criminal evaporated. He twisted suddenly, firing another energy burst, this one aimed directly at us. She didn't dodge. She accelerated straight through it. The shield flared, rattling my bones. You enjoy this far too much, I yelled. Focus, she said. The target clipped a tower and lost control for half a second. That was all she needed. A magnetic tether shot from beneath our hull, wrapped his propulsion rig, and yanked him into a spinning descent toward an enforcement platform below. She exhaled slowly. Only then did I realize she had barely been breathing the entire chase. Minutes later, the ship settled onto a landing strut overlooking the city. Silence flooded the cockpit, broken only by the ticking of cooling metal. My legs wobbled as adrenaline drained away. She secured the prisoner remotely and turned toward me. You adapted quickly, she said. Humans are excellent improvisers. Mostly because we cause many of our own emergencies. Her gaze lingered a fraction longer than before. Curious now. We lifted off again, climbing toward open sky. When the ship finally leveled into calm flight, I allowed myself a full breath. I would like to officially request less excitement for the remainder of my visit. You may request anything, she said. It will not influence reality. We moved toward the rear of the vessel, where the lighting softened and the engine noise faded into a low hum. Up close, the ship felt less like a weapon and more like a home that had forgotten how to be comfortable. Minimal decoration. Perfect order. Lonely, if a ship could be lonely. She studied me again. You truly did not intend to arrive? No. My plan for the evening involved noodles and mild professional validation. You chose poorly. I see that now. Her eyes drifted to my damaged wrist device. You attempted to activate it earlier. Yeah, I admitted. Reflex. When humans panic, we press buttons. Sometimes repeatedly. Will it function? I turned it over, wincing at the charred edge. Not unless I suddenly become a miracle worker. She crossed her arms. Explain what you require. To rebuild it? Rare conductive alloys. A phase stabilizer. Probably a quieter workplace than the middle of bounty hunts. A beat passed. Then she said, with obvious reluctance, You will remain here until repairs are complete. I blinked. Here, as in, your ship? Yes. With you? Yes. I let out a shaky laugh. Just to recap, an hour ago I had a normal job. Now I apparently live with the most dangerous woman in the quadrant. You are not required to enjoy it. Oh, I absolutely do not, I said quickly. She tilted her head slightly. You are calmer than most beings facing their mortality. I cope with humor. And denial. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite amusement. But close enough that warmth flickered through the intimidating exterior. Humans, she said, are either very brave or catastrophically reckless. Usually both, I replied. For the briefest moment, the corner of her mouth moved. Not a smile, but the ghost of one. Then a warning alarm pulsed softly from my wrist device. I looked down. The teleporter core emitted one sad spark, and died completely. Well, I said. That feels final. She followed my gaze. Then it is settled. I sighed. Somehow, accidentally teleporting into her bed had turned into moving in. The first morning aboard her ship was disorienting, to put it mildly. I woke up tangled in the sheets I had somehow managed to drag across the entire bed during the previous night's panic-filled arrival. The soft hum of the engines vibrated through the walls, a constant reminder that gravity here was negotiable, and the city outside was a vertical forest of neon and airborne vehicles. I blinked, attempting to orient myself, and realized my head was resting against a hard metallic edge, the frame of some console I had clearly ignored in my hasty collapse. She was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the other side of the bed, or rather, sitting cross-legged on the bed I had just invaded the night before, with a device in her hands and a tactical display projected in midair. She did not glance at me. She never glanced at me. That, I quickly learned, was part of her charm. Or intimidation. Maybe both. Good morning, I said, my voice cracking somewhere between nervous optimism and genuine panic. She didn't respond. Her eyes scanned the holographic projections with surgical precision. Okay, I muttered, rubbing my temples. She's ignoring me. Classic hunter behavior. I can work with that. I stumbled off the bed and nearly fell over a chair that was clearly not intended for human ergonomics. I waved my arms. You know, in human culture, greeting someone politely in the morning is kind of a thing. Just throwing it out there. She finally looked up, a single eyebrow lifting, a silent invitation to continue or die trying. I said hello? I am your new human partner. Possibly accidental partner, sure, but partner nonetheless. Hi. Her expression did not change, but her eyes flicked toward me for slightly longer than was strictly necessary. Perfect. First acknowledgement. Small victories. Breakfast was well, it wasn't breakfast exactly. It was some kind of nutrient gel that smelled faintly of metal and desperation, served in a cup that changed color when held. I poked it with a finger, which was a mistake. It squirted out, and almost hit the controls for the navigation panel. She sighed. You will learn quickly, she said, that this ship is delicate. I'm a professional, I said, licking the gel off my hand. Mostly. Except the part where I almost blew us up last night. But I've been learning on the job. She didn't laugh, but she didn't kill me either. Progress. Over the next few hours, I discovered the joys of being a human on a ship designed for one highly efficient, extremely lethal alien. First, I broke the food synthesizer twice. Once by pressing all the buttons at the same time in a panicked attempt to make coffee, and once by attempting to add sugar that apparently didn't exist in this galaxy. Second, I nearly triggered the primary weapons array when I leaned too close to the tactical console. And third, I realized that just sitting in the captain's chair, even briefly, was apparently a diplomatic crime in at least 6 neighboring systems. She found all of this mildly irritating. Or highly irritating. Hard to tell. But she tolerated it, mostly, which I took as a sign of trust. Or maybe amusement. We didn't speak much at first. She moved through the ship with precise efficiency, checking systems, monitoring signals, and occasionally muttering under her breath in a language I couldn't parse. I followed, nervously holding tools, attempting to be useful. Occasionally I would point at something and say, "Maybe this?" She would glance at me, nod once, and then fix it properly. It was during one of these moments, me fumbling with a wiring panel while she recalibrated the shield matrix, that I noticed the first real crack in her armor. "You are persistent," she said, not looking at me. I paused, screwdriver halfway to a spark. "Persistent? That's usually a compliment for humans, right?" "Depends on the species," she muttered, but there was a hint of something softer in her tone. "Curiosity, maybe?" I grinned. "Then I guess I'm nailing it." The ship shuddered suddenly, alarms flashing as another squadron of enemy vessels appeared on the radar. Her expression hardened instantly. She moved to the tactical console, and I knew better than to touch anything. I hovered awkwardly nearby, holding a tool that was suddenly completely useless. "They will assume you are my partner," she said over the comms. "Already? They barely know me," I muttered. "They judge by association. You are terrifying by proximity alone." I tried to feel proud, but my pride was interrupted by a sharp jolt as the ship twisted and dodged incoming fire. I was entirely unprepared. But instinct kicked in. I noticed the enemy ship's frequency modulator was causing interference in her sensors. Without thinking, I grabbed a secondary console and rerouted signals, filtering the interference just enough to give her clear readings. Her hands moved on the controls like lightning, perfectly coordinated, deadly precise. And I realized something astonishing. Despite all the danger, despite the chaos, I was contributing. My human improvisation, my mistakes, my stupid instincts, they were useful here. She caught my eye for a fraction of a second. Just long enough for a tiny flash of something, maybe respect, maybe amusement, to appear. And then it was gone. The target ships were destroyed or scattered, and the immediate threat vanished. We floated in silence for a moment, the ship's engines humming softly. I was still holding the useless tool in my hands, feeling like a human-sized paperweight. "You could have done nothing," she said finally. "I could have. But I didn't," I said. "Humans rarely do nothing when there's a chance we might look competent." Her gaze lingered again, assessing, weighing. And somewhere in the middle of that silent evaluation, I felt a strange warmth spread through my chest. Not fear, not panic, not adrenaline. Something else. Something that maybe had a name, pride. Maybe even connection. "Efficient," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Thank you," I said, grinning stupidly. "I'll take it." She ignored the thanks. That was fine. I could live with being ignored as long as she wasn't trying to vaporize me. Hours passed. Repairs had to be made, systems calibrated, weapons tested, and every single moment of downtime became another opportunity for me to poke at the impossible technology of her ship, offering suggestions she often ignored but occasionally used. And each time, her eyes softened just a fraction, her posture relaxed ever so slightly. By evening, I realized something extraordinary. I was no longer a random human who teleported into her bed. I was part of the crew. Reluctantly, skeptically, and perhaps for the first time in my life, I felt valued. I had an expected friendship. I had an expected respect. I hadn't even expected a hint of warmth. But here it was. In small doses, almost imperceptible, but undeniably there. And somewhere deep in the back of my mind, I knew that the chaos of last night, the explosions, the panic scrambling, the accidental heroics, had done more than just put me on her ship. It had started something I wasn't ready to name yet, something dangerous, thrilling, and entirely unexpected. Humans are persistent, I reminded myself. And apparently, so am I. The teleporter hummed softly on the workbench, tiny sparks dancing across its surface like impatient fireflies. After days of improvisation, jury-rigging, and more caffeine than I'd admit to any human being, it finally looked stable enough to try a controlled jump. My hands hovered over the controls, hard hammering, not with fear, exactly, but with an entirely new, heavier sort of tension. She leaned against the wall behind me, arms crossed, observing. Her posture was casual, but every line of her body screamed readiness. One twitch and she could turn from guardian to weapon in a heartbeat. I swallowed. "You know," I said, "I'm supposed to go home now. Should be exciting." "Supposed to?" Her voice was calm, almost clinical. "Well," I admitted, "it's complicated. Turns out I've gotten attached to this ship. And maybe someone in it." Her head tilted slightly, the kind of subtle movement that carried more weight than any roar of engines. She didn't look surprised. Not exactly. More like she had been waiting for me to say something like that, and was mildly annoyed I had taken so long. I stepped closer to the teleporter, fingers brushing over the controls. Statistically speaking, humans don't usually teleport into the beds of lethal alien bounty hunters and survive. Even fewer develop feelings. My cheeks warmed despite the ambient glow of the lab. Her lips twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. "You are foolish." "Yeah," I said, grinning despite the pounding in my chest. "But charmingly so." The moment hung in the air, fragile, unspoken, like a thread stretched taut over a canyon. I wanted to reach for her hand, to close the gap between this ridiculous, terrifying, exhilarating adventure and something that might actually feel like belonging. But I didn't. Not yet. The teleporter powered up fully, a steady hum vibrating through the room. I could go home, leave the chaos, leave the danger, leave her. And I realized, suddenly, painfully, that leaving would feel like stepping out of a story halfway through, the wrong ending. "I could leave now," I said softly. "Teleport back to my apartment, my quiet life, the usual misery of commuting and instant noodles." She watched me, arms still crossed, expression unreadable. "And yet you hesitate." I looked down at my hands. "Because it would be boring. And wrong." She didn't respond immediately. The pause stretched, heavy and warm. I swallowed, daring to meet her eyes. "Then it is settled," she said finally, her voice steady but softer than usual. "You remain." A rush of relief surged through me, mixed with a thrill that had nothing to do with escaping death or fixing technology. Somehow, by accident, by chaos, by sheer human stupidity, I had carved a place in her life, and in this galaxy of sharp edges and lethal precision, that was no small thing. I exhaled, letting my shoulders drop for the first time in what felt like weeks. "Good," I said. "Because frankly, leaving would feel like I was abandoning the most terrifying woman in the quadrant. And I'm not ready for that." For the first time, her guard softened just enough for me to notice. A tiny fraction of her formidable presence melted into something almost approachable, almost human. And in that brief flicker, I realized that maybe, just maybe, she felt it too. I stepped closer, close enough that the hum of the teleporter mingled with the quiet rhythm of her breath. "You know," I said, "if humans are supposed to learn from mistakes, this one might just be the best I've ever made." She didn't smile, but the corner of her mouth twitched. "Do not flatter yourself." "I'm not," I said, eyes locked on hers. "I'm stating facts." Another beat of silence, the kind that presses on your chest, then she exhaled. "You are inefficient. Reckless. Disruptive." I grinned. "All qualities you like to claim you can tolerate." Her eyes flickered then softened. Stay anyway, she said. And just like that, the galaxy contracted around us, dangerous, chaotic, brilliant, and entirely ours. I stepped back from the teleporter, my heart still hammering, and realized something extraordinary. We were partners, not because the universe demanded it, not because of any contract or law, but because two impossibly stubborn individuals had collided in the most improbable way. A sudden flicker on the teleporter caught my eye. Sparks jumped again, and before I could investigate, another human materialized in the room. He landed, less gracefully than I had, squarely on the same bed I had once invaded. He froze, wide-eyed, staring at her. I can explain?" he whispered. She turned slowly toward him, weapon already in hand, her expression unreadable. I braced for chaos, for screams, for another near-death experience. Instead, she sighed and looked back at me, exasperation mingling with something warmer. "Is this a human mating ritual?" I couldn't help it. I laughed. A full, ridiculous, human laugh. "Apparently," I said, shrugging. The new arrival froze again, unsure whether to flee, apologize, or faint. Meanwhile, the teleporter hummed softly, indifferent to the complicated mess it had caused. I leaned against the console, glancing at her. "Across a galaxy of perfect species," I said quietly, "it isn't strength, or speed, or precision that makes humans remarkable." Her eyes met mine, faintly amused. "It's our talent for catastrophic accidents," I continued, "and the stubborn courage to stay when those accidents somehow create something worth fighting for." She tilted her head slightly, almost imperceptibly smiling. I glanced at the teleporter, at the newcomer, at the sprawling neon city beyond the viewport. And for the first time, I felt truly at home. Not because of where I was, but because of who I had accidentally landed beside, who had chosen to keep me there, and the chaos we would navigate together. In the galaxy's cold, precise, dangerous expanse, it was humans, apparently, who made life most interesting. And sometimes, the most terrifying accidents brought the greatest rewards. I grinned, brushing imaginary dust off my jumpsuit. "Well," I said, "guess I'd better get used to living dangerously, and hopefully romantically, too." She looked at me, narrowed her eyes, and said, "Do not speak foolishness." And for once, I didn't mind.